Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPaWrites here again, and Gunfire Games may have broken some things in Remnant 2 with the most recent patch, most notably the Way of Lusa Invoker archetype skill. This thing is insane right now, so I figured I would do a build guide template for you guys that you can really customize in order to take advantage of this in a bunch of different ways and customize it to your own personal playstyle, because it is a ton of fun and very effective in ways that we haven't seen in a long time on Apocalypse difficulty. So with the Way of Lusa, if you missed it, the most recent change was that you can generate Sand Devils with ranged and melee damage like normal, but also mod and skill damage, and that's where this becomes way more effective, because you can essentially permanently stun bosses, mini bosses, and aberrations with the constant sand blasts you generate from the Sand Devils. And the stun is the thing that I believe will eventually get modified, because that's the broken part. But the damage is also very, very good, especially when you pair it with a couple really fun things. So I am using the Way of Lusa with the Monolith. Any passive mod where you can set it on an enemy and just generate damage over time is going to be very, very good. But the Sandstorm specifically also will give enemies exposed, so that's huge as well, and you can just generate that damage. You combine that with feedback, and you're essentially just generating mod power all the time, regardless of what your secondary archetype is. Another really good option is the Nebula. You have your Nano Swarm. This is already very strong, one of the strongest secondary weapons in the game, but you have your Nano Swarm, and you combine the Way of Lusa, the Sandstorm, the Nano Swarm with a maxed out amplitude, and it just travels for days. And it is very powerful. It does a bunch of damage. It can clear ads, so it's effective not only just patrolling the world, but you can essentially run through entire worlds on Apocalypse difficulty with this without breaking much of a sweat, because of how wide of a range it has, how much damage you do, all that kind of good stuff. It doesn't really take advantage of the Sand Devils aspect with the smaller enemies, but you can use other options for that as well. And because of the way you're able to generate mod power, you can essentially have your Nano Swarm and your Sandstorm up constantly, so it feels very good in that way. Now, as far as the rest of the things that I was personally running, I would always keep on Legacy Protocol to make sure I had that reduced skill cooldown and also increased skill duration, which is nice for a lot of different options. I also had on Burden the Destroyer, Burden the Gambler, Burden or Zohe's Ring, as well as the Sapphire Dreamstone. Those were all effective. You want to essentially try to get your mods back as quickly as possible. Also, your skill cooldown pretty low, so that way you can have it on repeat. And that's where I'm going to come into my second archetype that I was running. You're going to see in the gameplay, I was going back and forth with a lot of different options. So I would run the Ritualist for quite a bit. This is very, very effective, especially while you're just patrolling the area. Because of amplitude and the increased range of your skills, you are essentially going to hit enemies halfway across the map, it feels like, with some of your Ritualist skills. So that's very, very nice. You could also run it with something like even the Explorer. Say you're running the Explorer with the Gold Digger perk, you can actually just spam that, because you have so many charges, and you'll get your Way of Lusa back instantly. So that's very nice as well. There are a lot of other options that you can run with this, like Archon, Summoner I've seen really good to make almost essentially a perma-stun build for enemies. You could run it with Engineer. There's just a lot of different options that can be very effective. So if you have a favorite archetype that you want to combine with this, it can be very, very good. And like I said, damage is very nice. The mod generation is insane. The skill damage is pretty nice as well, and just the stun locking of bosses is absolutely wild to watch. And one of my favorite things in the game right now, because as you heard with what I was explaining with my own personal build, the only defensive aspect I really had on was the Shielded Heart. The reason for that is I was stunning the bosses so much, I was stunning enemies in general so often, that I really didn't have to worry about taking damage all that much. And so I did run the Shielded Heart, so I would pop a shield before heading into combat, or when I lost my shield, just to make sure I stayed alive. But my defenses weren't all that high. I wasn't running bulwark or anything of that nature either. So if you want to build a more defensive option with this, you can do that absolutely if you want to be more secure in your playstyle. But it's not really necessary because of what you're doing. Again, this is one of those things that because of how good it is, because of the stun being so powerful against so many different enemies, I would not be shocked if this does get adjusted, if that increase in stagger that it's doing right now is purely a bug or something of that nature. So keep in mind that if they do changes in the near future, if this is already patched when you're watching this video, I apologize. But in general, I think this is very fun, very effective, and something that you should definitely be trying out for yourself, especially if you're bored of what you've been using and want to try something different that's not as defensive as you may be used to running on Apocalypse difficulty. Anyway, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, it helps me out tremendously, shows me want to see more Remnant 2 content going forward. I appreciate all the love on the videos recently. My name is JoPa, have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.
Something doesn't feel right. Looking good.